Fantastic. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another session of Lens with Advanced Design. I am your host, Hector Silva, and today we have the pleasure of having on Lens our next guest, Mitzi Okou, a UX and visual designer from Atlanta, Georgia. Thank you so much for being on here, Mitzi. And a little bit about Mitzi is after she received her bachelor's degree in graphic design from SCAD, also known as Savannah College of Art and Design, she moved to San Diego, California, where she currently works as an interaction and visual designer at HP. So Mitzi, thank you so much for being here. And for those who are watching, thank you so much. Today we'll be talking a little bit about activism and other topics. But before we jump into those topics, Mitzi, if you want to kind of introduce yourself a little bit more so that people get to know you and what you're doing in the design community.
Yeah, my name's Mitzi, and recently I co-founded a platform called We're the Black Designers, and we just had a conference on June 27th that basically highlighted the hardships as well as some solutions on the struggles of becoming a designer as a Black person. And so that's kind of what I do in terms of activism. But even before then, I was a musician, and that's kind of how I got into design. Then I went to SCAD, like you said, and now I'm at HP. So yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, we're just going to jump right in. And like I mentioned, um, our topic that we're going to be covering today is performative activism and slacktivism, because in the age of social media, I think the majority of us are doing the latter.
Mm-hmm.
And let's shed some light on what that means. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so performative activism is just basically mostly doing activism for one's personal gain. So sometimes you'll see celebrities post a black square and talk about how it relates to themselves and center themselves rather than actually talking about their point of view and what's going on and why they have that point of view or why they disagree with some things. And then there's slacktivism, which is, slightly a little bit better than performative activism because it's like you're actually doing it as, devoting yourself to a cause, but at a very minimal effort. So that kind of looks like just signing petitions, donating money, which there's nothing wrong with that. But the problem of slacktivism is that there's no follow through, right? So it's like people will give their money and donate and they will sign petitions, but they won't really follow up on what happens with that. And we see all this slacktivism happen, which kind of contributes to the fact that nothing really gets done because no one really actually puts in the energy to follow up on all of those things that they're putting the effort to be an activist for.
and then you have activism, which is boots on the ground, actually being part of protests and actually, like you said, following through and making changes, right? So how do this performative activism and slacktivism and even activism, how do designers, how is this a part of our community, and why does it matter so much right now? 2020, just a god awful year so far, and it feels like it's been a roller coaster ride, not just because of the pandemic, but with news, with the political climate, with everything that's happening in our communities. Um, we sometimes we feel like design can be an oasis, and people kind of take refuge there, right? And they get away from the real world, right? And then they go ahead and go on social media and put a black square, right? So why, for someone who's watching this and is going to be watching this later on YouTube, why does this matter to them?
So I think it matters because one, design is probably the most progressive field out there. We're creating all of these, amazing creative solutions that are supposed to be, for everyone and inclusive of everyone. But as we've been seeing, majority of this field is predominantly white and has no diversity. So what was being explained in the conference was a lot of, biases from white designers are entering these products and therefore just like not doing their job by working for everyone, right? So it's like you're not actually getting diverse product. You're only getting a product that is working for one type of person or one population of people rather than all types of population of people. And then we also have, the actual work environment within the design field. So it relates to performative activism because all these organizations are posting all these black squares and being like, we stand with the Black community, we stand against racism, and we're gonna donate this much money to this initiative. But yet them not hiring Black people is contributing to racial injustice, and basically ignoring the fact that when you don't hire Black people, they just fall into all these vicious cycles that they're trying to get out of. So that's performative activism. And even then, it relates to slacktivism too, because I don't really see organizations following up and being like, okay, I donated this much money to this organization. Where is that money going, right? So Zaria Cameron, who spoke at Black Ignite, she was saying that, all of these organizations donate all this money to HBCUs, but they don't follow up and are just like asking HBCUs, where are you putting that money? Are you putting that in your students? Like, where are you putting that for, the solution of streaming Black designers into the design field, and making that work? Like, it's not really contributing to that. So that's why it matters, because as designer, we're always doing the whole, when you design for one, you design for all, but we're not really looking at who's designing that thing for that one person, therefore designing for all. So it's like, it's counterintuitive in itself. So that's why we should care, because it's just like, as a designer, if you're not caring about that, then you're not really doing your skills justice, basically.
Yeah, and it just seems like when a lot of, these injustices are happening and continue to happen, companies are just putting a Band-Aid on it. Like you said, they come forward and say, we've donated money. And to me, that just seems like a Band-Aid. A lot of other companies would come forward and say, we're starting, a committee that is going to address, diversity in our workplace.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's like, you're kind of reacting to a lot of this as opposed to actually building a foundation that will, stay here for right? Like, this stuff doesn't go away. Like, whatever, these injustices and things that are happening to the minority communities are not something that will go away and by tomorrow. So if someone, if there's someone who's out there watching this and they work for a really big company or even a small studio, and they feel really strong about this and they're very passionate about this, should they speak up, or should they? I feel like a lot of times designers are a little afraid or intimidated to say something in their workplace because obviously their employment might be in jeopardy.
Right.
What are some suggestions you have if they feel that their company is not, acting on something, or they might feel uncomfortable in their workplace?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think, again, it goes towards that whole definition of slacktivism, where it's just like you're doing activism at a surface level that has no risk. So when you're not taking that risk for basically our society, you're just contributing to slacktivism, right? But I think you just have to be very courageous. So when George Floyd happened and companies started posting Black squares, I was very scared, but I was like, as a Black person, that's enough. It's horrifying to see people who look like me constantly being murdered. And then it makes me so angry that a field that I work in says that they stand with us, but then they don't hire us. And I was just like, okay, well, that's enough. So I'm going to individually just post on these major companies and design agencies and be like, and challenge them when they say they stand with the Black community, be like, hey, it doesn't look, you literally contribute to the data that shows that 3% of this field is Black. And when it's that low, you're contributing and ignoring all these other Black people that are super talented and are trying to get hired and contributing to racial injustice. And so you have to take that risk to want to make change, because at the end of the day, I think people need to be reminded that it's not about you, and that more people are willing to actually be transparent about it, especially because I think we're in a time where it's just like we're really trying to shift that change. I don't know what it is about 2020, but it's just like people are really wanting to change. But even then, also, if you're afraid, take advantage of HR. There are so many organizations that will back you up and expose, you know, the toxicity of, you know, your company doing something horrible to you if you're trying to speak out on something that is bad that they're doing. I mean, that's the beauty of social media, right? Like everything is being exposed on such a high level, that I don't think there's any need to be afraid of taking that risk to expose, you know, wrongdoings, especially if they're wrong for a reason. And, you know, if companies are trying to cover up, and they also know that it's wrong, right? So it's just like, find that community that can back you up. There's plenty. I run one of them. So it's like, you just have to kind of like take the risk and just really understand that it's like not about you. It's just for a better future.
Absolutely. Now, before we dive into your organization, you know, where are the Black designers, I want to get a little personal and talk about you and your upbringing, and then going to SCAD, which is, from an outsider perspective, you know, if you look at SCAD, that is pretty also not very diverse. I don't know how else to say that. And I just kind of want to get, if you can walk us through your experience of what that was like going to school there and the lack of diversity, and how was your education?
Yeah. So, you know, I have like a love-hate relationship with SCAD. I'm not going to completely just, you know, trash it and say that it was a horrible experience. There are things that I loved, especially because I transferred from a music school. And that major was pretty toxic. So coming from something that's very like power hungry to something that's more collaborative and people wanting to collaborate with you, that was great. And, you know, SCAD was great in the sense that they accepted anyone and everyone of all types of skill levels, and then took you, and, you know, you didn't have to know any type of art, and they just made you into a very, you know, great designer with all their amazing resources. But, you know, speaking, I mean, if you look on social media now, like we have, you know, our BMLBs calling out SCAD on the fact that there was just there just wasn't really any great treatment towards our Black Student Alliance. You know, like we have Black students coming out and saying that they had a horrible racist experience. I kind of feel like I didn't have the greatest experience. I kind of felt like I was always having to fight my white counterparts for opportunities and prove that I could do more just to get on the same level of opportunities that they were getting. And even then I didn't even reach it, because I feel like not enough teachers believed in me to give me those opportunities and whatnot. And even after school, I got my own job, I got my own fellowship and whatnot. So as great as, so SCAD has amazing resources, I don't think that they're very good at distributing those resources to their Black students and giving them the proper treatment, financially, socially, to help them thrive and be their best. Like, I mean, when you see HBCUs and, you know, some of the communication design departments don't get as much great funding, but they produce the most amazing Black designers, right? And so then we have Black kids going to predominantly white institutions that have all these great resources, but we're not getting into those resources. And we're like, you know, it's just like if HBCUs can go and create amazing designers with like limited resources, it's like Zaria said in Black Ignite, like imagine what we could do with like proper resources, proper mentorship, you know, just proper treatment out of school, and just like some type of like acknowledgement that we exist. So I think that's kind of like my strife with it. And the other thing is, you know, SCAD, I went to the Savannah campus, which is just a very rich city and rich community and predominantly Black. But unfortunately, there was like this weird segregated tension where it's just like, you know, you would see that SCAD was in all these Black neighborhoods gentrifying it, but you wouldn't see a streamline or them taking advantage of all of these Black people and really cultivating Black talent. So that was the other thing that I had a problem with, that I think they kind of need to take some time to really think about. Like, it's not just only about, you know, giving a scholarship because that's the solution that they came out with, right? It's about like helping students see themselves in that environment so that they can succeed.
Yeah, that sounds very familiar to a lot of just big institutions and universities that are placed in communities, you know. I'm not going to say which institutions or anything like that, but you know, a lot of them are located in smaller cities, you know, in the middle of nowhere, or cities that are predominantly, you know, minority, and the institutions usually segregate themselves from these communities and usually build their own community in their own city within the university so that people don't have to collaborate or communicate with anyone from the outside. And that is very
Mm-hmm.
harmful to the surrounding communities. Um, so yeah, you know, that's very unfortunate. And also, you know, you were talking about SCAD, and your experience as a student there. You know, SCAD isn't new to any of these controversies. I've read up a lot on SCAD and their past histories with how they treat their educators and their students, and it's just unfortunate. But that's another session at another time when we invite Patricia on Lens. Then we put her on the hot seat and we ask her these questions. But let's dive into where are the Black designers, because that was a huge conference that happened
Mm-hmm.
you know, in the middle of everything that was happening a couple of months ago, and just amazing traction. You had amazing speakers on there, and you gave, you know, a lot of people a really big platform. And I want to dive into that and kind of how that all came to be
Mm-hmm.
and how you were involved in all that.
Yeah, so I mean, how that came to be was just like, I think it was just I think after, like, people probably think that, oh, George Floyd like made this happen, and it's not that. I think that it was a small catalyst in being fed up, but I think the thing that really triggered it was, again, that performative activism of just like companies putting those Black squares and being like, well, we support the Black community. It's almost like Black History Month all over again, where Black History Month rolls around and then companies are like, oh, look at our token Black employees and how well we treat them, and here's their story on why they love us. And I'm just like, but I'm pretty sure not that many Black people work at that company, but whatever. So I think seeing that performative activism really triggered that, and triggered all of these, you know, experiences and just like trauma that has been built up over like a long period of time. So even starting from like at SCAD, where, you know, like I felt like I was fighting so hard for opportunities and not getting most of them, even though I felt like I was doing more than other students. Going to, you know, like amazing fellowships, but being like the only Black person in the room, and just thinking that, do they realize that this is a problem? Like, what's going on? You know, to like microaggressions at, you know, work, and people not realizing that what they're saying is very hurtful and just contributing to just like all this like racial trauma. So basically my other co-founder, Garrett Albury, we tried to kind of do something similar at SCAD, where we tried to kind of like call them out on just like the lack of streamlining of Black students while they were in a predominantly Black neighborhood and Black city. And so that didn't really pick off the ground because, you know, like, one, it was physical, and we were trying to run this out of SCAD, and we didn't think that they would approve. And, you know, things weren't lining up, funding wasn't lining up, people were doing their own thing. And then after George Floyd, I called Garrett again because this happened a few years ago, and I was like, hey, like let's try to just do some type of like little webinar for our community, and just like talk about what's going on and everything like that, and like let's launch a poster challenge. And he was like, okay, like let's do it together. And so we released the poster challenge, and that is kind of what really like just ignited everything. And we first thought we were going to get like 300 people, and we were just going to be completely happy with that. And then that just ignited to like past 1,000, and then we were just seeing all these like numbers like build up. And Garrett and I were just like, okay, we have to, how are we going to host all these people? We need to make this free. Like, it doesn't make any sense to cap this, because we're trying to see something really important. And we were looking at Zoom rooms, and they were just getting crazy expensive. And then so many people reached out and were like, I've been waiting for this. I've been wanting to help in a way. Like, this is amazing. Like, let's just let me know what you need. So we leveraged a lot of great resources from individuals and companies. And then, we got introduced to one speaker, and then one speaker introduced us to another speaker, and then another one. And it was just very communal. And I think that's what our brand is about community. It's not about like centering anybody. It's just really about the fact that this is a very communal platform, and the community just kind of like makes up our brand. And so we put that together, and we got help from people like Cheryl and one of the favorites, Raja, and then we put that together. And so that's how that basically came about. And after the conference, we were just like, okay, like just keep this going. And so we kind of turned it into a platform where it's just more educational, and just more of a platform where we amplify Black creatives and really help and heal the community through like mental and wellness resources, and just like events and whatnot. And so we do that kind of work. And right now we're actually putting together a fall series where we're just going to be providing like educational events, and kind of almost like doing workshops and helping Black designers like learn things that they didn't learn at school, but for free, because this is, again, is a community. And so that's kind of like what we're doing right now. But at the same time, we're being very transparent about everything, whether we make mistakes, the type of data that we're getting, because I think there is a lesson to be taught to other organizations and companies that people love transparency. They like to know where their energy is going and how it's being used. So we're trying to kind of like teach a lesson in the sense that whatever energy you give us, this is where it's going. This is how it's affecting our Black creatives, and how we're going to use it for good for our Black designers. And even if we make mistakes, we're trying to really kind of like show people that it's okay to make mistakes, as long as you can learn together and recover as a community. Because I think when you make space for mistakes, you make space for difficult conversations that need to be had, and you're also deconstructing perfectionism, which is a part of the whole white supremacist structure. So that's kind of like what we're doing. We're just trying to like teach lessons and also lead everybody at the same time, while kind of like divesting and deconstructing like white supremacist practices.
That is awesome. That reminds me of very similar story of how advanced design started. Just the idea of making education accessible, right?
Mm-hmm.
And getting it to the people that are discriminated, because education, if you look at education, I'm not even going to talk about design right now, but in general, it's pretty elitist, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have a lot of money to afford it, or
Right.
or you go into debt, and that debt can cripple your growth when you leave school. And there's just some things in there that are thrown in there that are out of your control, like a recession or a pandemic, right? So it's elitist, and there's a lot of organizations like yourself and other organizations that are having these workshops and these resources, and are addressing things like mental health and well-being, and that's fantastic. I love that. I think it is a necessity, and I'm so happy that this is all kind of coming together. I want to know a little bit about I know you talked about what you're planning to do in the coming months, in the coming weeks. You as yourself as a co-founder, what is your long-term vision, right? Like, are you guys thinking about forming a nonprofit? What exactly, like, what is your vision, in maybe a year, 2, 3 years out?
Yeah, we're really working hard towards getting our nonprofit license because we just want to do so many things for our Black creatives. And we also want to speak to our mission statement of amplifying Black creatives and services by paying for that. I think that's really important that services aren't free, whether it's doing something good or not. Like, we still have to support. And so, yeah, we're just trying to work towards a nonprofit. We're looking at, bigger things on how we can try and even do, like, be a for-profit business, but in a way that's for good. So even just trying to establish ourselves as some type of like measurement or institution that can go in and measure just like the amount of diversity and representation in different companies, because this agenda that we have of pushing more diversity and representation, especially for Black creatives, is really, really important. And I think the way we can kind of like break the trend is to really hold more people accountable and to push for transparency, but also, like, make people understand that it is okay to take your time to work towards things. Like, it's not about having the answer instantly. Like, these companies aren't gonna be like up to 50% Black people overnight. That's not going to happen. But I think if you are very, again, transparent about your users, your customers, whoever you are creating for, I think people would be more understanding that everyone is working hard towards that. So I kind of really hope that we can kind of become that institution or that measurement to kind of push companies forward in terms of diversity and representation.
Absolutely. And what are your thoughts, for someone like myself and other people that are kind of looking at everything your team is doing from the outside as an ally? What are some things that we can do,
Mm-hmm.
that we can provide, so that we can make sure that, like you mentioned, this is a movement and not a moment, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think speaking to this is moving on and not a moment, like keeping that fire, right? Like, just being really honest, we're kind of seeing a decline in activity, but I think it kind of goes towards that whole vicious cycle that we're in, where an individual is murdered at the hands of police, and the footage is exposed at the beginning of the summertime, and then everyone gets passionate and angry about it, and then we have a surge in performative activism and slacktivism, where companies, individuals, and people, post and whatnot, and then, things, normalcy starts to creep back with, people being distracted by other things that are going on. So people are talking about COVID again, even though it's like, it's been here like forever at this point. Like, at this point, we're just looking at how many people are dying, masks are available, everything's kind of like available at this point. It still sucks a lot, but it's distracting from the fact that, like, this is a real issue that needs attention, right? Like Black lives are not a trend, they're not fashionable. They're real lives, and these are like real issues that we need to solve. So I would say just in general, keeping the fire, right? Like, even pushing others to just be more, like, continuing being active. And I understand that, some of the arguments that I get are just like, well, it's very overwhelming, and it can be very, toxic to constantly be seeing BML and all of these deaths and whatnot. I'm just like, yeah, I understand that, but imagine being a Black person seeing that every single day of your entire life since the day you were basically like born, right? So it's like, there's not really an excuse, because we're all tired, but it's just like, we want to fight for equality and just, push towards a better future. So it's just like reaching out and pushing towards a better future, and being involved in initiatives, donating money, showing up at like events, reaching out to initiatives, being like, what can I do? You know, even asking questions and holding organizations accountable and be like, hey, I donated, like where does this money go towards, or where is my money going? I want to know so I can, you know, understand like who's it helping and whatnot. So um again, I think to break the trend, it's just like we can't force people to want to um you know, be super active, so you just have to take it upon yourself to basically do that, essentially. And I think that's what I would recommend.
Absolutely. And I love this. There's a statement on your website that says this year there's a sense of urgency and attention around the lack of representation in the design industry. And and you know, if we expand on that about representation, it's not just, you know, Black designers or other minority designers, but that includes women, and that includes, you know, so many other people that are have been fighting, you know, for changes in design. Design, like you mentioned, is a very male-dominated field. I'm coming from industrial design. I know that you're in interaction, and I'm sure there's other disciplines that is also very male-dominated. And you know, as an educator, I'm always talking about that. I'm always, you know, trying to provide solutions. And yeah, I mean, it's just really strange that it's 2020 and you know, is we're kind of still fighting for this, and
Yeah.
there isn't anyone out there that is fighting for it. You know, we have people like yourself who are building platforms so that people are equipped to, you know, fight for this. So um yeah, it is extremely it's amazing the work that you and your team are doing.
Yeah, they're awesome.
And yeah, I mean, did you ever see yourself in this position a couple of years ago? I mean, some people go to school,
Mhm.
they get their career, they just want to do their 9 to 5, start a family,
Mhm.
and you know, and that's okay too. Uh,
Yeah.
did you ever see yourself, you know, being on the spotlight and being a leader?
To be honest, no, I didn't. I think if you would have gone back in time and would have told me that like I did this, I would have just laughed in your face, to be honest. But I'm not really like one to kind of sit and be complicit about things. That's just not really how I was raised. I was kind of like raised to kind of like annoy people and vocalize, you know, when like just really call out people and point out when something is wrong or when someone is doing something wrong. And so I mean, I'm not surprised that I landed here, and I think that um I think faith works in mysterious ways, in the sense that I feel like there's a reason why I met a lot of these people along my career and along my life, because I think they have kind of like secretly prepped me to handle things like this. So yeah, I'm not really surprised, but I definitely wasn't really expecting it. And I'm still getting used to it too, right? Like again, like this is a very communal brand. So I was very hesitant about putting my face behind it because I don't want to center myself. And I think that's one thing about activism. Again, it's just like not about you, it's about other people. So I was kind of like, okay, I don't really want to center myself for this. But, you know, at the same time, like, you know, I think it would be doing a disservice to a lot of Black women to not stand up and be like, hey, like I did this, like Black women, you know, have done all these things, and I've really like, birthed all these things that are trying to really push for change in a really, really disruptive way. So yeah, I think it's just I'm still getting like used to it. It's like weird because people were just like, oh, like I feel like I'm talking to a celebrity. I'm just like, I'm just a normal person, just like you. And if anything, like I feel a little bit intimidated because you're in a higher position, and I like don't want to say the wrong thing that can, you know, like ruin my career. But you know, it's a risk I'm willing to take. So
Yeah, it's a very selfless position to be in, and I think for those who are interested in being a part of organizations and doing work in nonprofits, it is definitely selfless, not selfish. So make sure you get that right and you know the difference.
Mm-hmm.
And but it's extremely impactful and very fulfilling. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's more fulfilling than any job I've ever had in my life, because you know that you're doing something that matters and something that is going to stay you know there for the rest of history. And I think one thing I'd like to share with you and for those who are watching is, since you're leading this organization, I think people, just like how you mentioned about transparency, people need to understand that at the end of the day, we are also humans and that we make
Mm-hmm.
mistakes. And even though we're in a position of, being the executive director, being a leader, it doesn't mean that we're perfect. We're going to make mistakes. And I think with 2020 happening and everything else, people are waiting for people to trip up.
Mm-hmm.
People are waiting for people to call them out. Usually it's the people that are doing the right thing and good for their community. And I don't know why. I've seen that recently where a lot of really good people are just being called out for just being human and making mistakes. And that is just that bothers me because I'm like, well, that's not fair. Everyone, yeah, the stakes are really high, but I'm also not perfect. So
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think that's what, as an organization, we're trying to kind of teach everyone is like, it's okay to make mistakes. Like we got so much criticism after, the conference. And some people were saying that we were actually, silencing Black voices by not including, some people, and we were getting side eyes from people and whatnot. But I think that at the end of the day, people do tend to kind of forget that we're all human beings, right? And like usually the first time of anything is not going to be perfect. But at the end of the day, we're trying to all push for something good, right? And give opportunities to other however we can. But I think that's the thing is just like I think it's about handling it with grace as well, right? Because social media is just like another like face that people hide behind, right? But then I think when you also talk to people, I think you find that you have very meaningful conversations, and that like you find interesting perspectives that I think social media has a tendency to um, almost kind of make too negative or just negative, period. So I think that's the other thing. It's just about like communication, like verbal communication, and not just relying on social media to like deliver what you're trying to say, because you can get in so much trouble with that. I feel like I got into a few fights, and then at the end I was just kind of like, okay, let me just talk to this person and see like what they mean. And then we actually ended up loving each other like very much. So it's just like yeah, like I think people need to understand that like social media has a tendency to really dehumanize a lot of things, and that like at the end of the day, like that's not the final hammer or anything like that, and it's just better to verbally talk to that person.
absolutely. And I think for someone who's been doing this for the last 4 years, doing the nonprofit work, we've had our shares of just unnecessary drama,
Mm-hmm.
people who are waiting for us to fail.
Mm-hmm.
And it's annoying because it's like noise, it's like there and you're just like, let us work, right?
Right.
Two things that I've noticed is, you will never be criticized by someone who is doing more than you.
Mm-hmm.
You will only be criticized by someone who's doing less. That's one thing that I've come to learn in all of this. And then the person who's usually criticizing you the most is usually the person that's sitting right in front of you, whether it's at your event or whatever you're doing. They're usually like, you know there watching, and it's interesting. Um and like I said, I think everyone's always, or people are always just trying to find a flaw.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that they understand that we're also humans and
Mhm.
we have our own, lives and family, and we're just trying to do right, and we're just trying to do good, and we're just trying to leave a really good legacy behind.
Yeah, and I think the great advice I got from amazing designers I've talked to as well, to think about almost in a way to kind of like flip the criticism so it's just more positive, but it's just like um, no one really says anything to you when you're not doing something super impactful. Like, you're doing something super right when like there are those like people that like have something to say. So it's just like, even then I'm just like, when I see some people criticizing, I'm just like, I really am flattered by the fact that you are putting in this energy to like, say these things, because I think you and I both know it's not necessary, but there seems to be something that I'm doing that I think is good that is really bothering you. But at the end of the day too, like, I think some people that are very critical as well, like I think there are those people that are just critical just to be nasty and whatnot, but I think there are those people that are just like giving that criticism because they do care, and it's almost kind of like tough love. And I think you have to again sift through some of that noise to find like the gem, and some of that criticism, because some of it is helpful. The way it's delivered, yeah, sure, it may not be perfect and it may hurt a little bit, but I think when you find those gems that can really make you stronger, it's just like energy that they put in to like make you better.
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, obviously we live in a social media age where social media is riddled with a lot of this noise. There's a lot of pages that are just exist to just repost people's work, and I'm always on social media looking for genuine content, right? There's so much duplication on social media, and it's really easy to get lost in the sea
Mhm.
kind of sameness, right? So really happy that your organization exists, right? I think that's quality over quantity. There's too
Mhm.
much quantity right now. And really happy that you are providing a platform for designers who are, up until now have been kind of just working with their heads down and in
Mhm.
the shadows, right? So really appreciate the work that you're doing.
Yeah, it's no problem. It's honestly a pleasure, and it's not even like thanks to me. It's like thanks to so many people like behind the scenes that are like helping me make this happen. I do have to shout out a few people. I have to shout out Rashana, Terrell, Ritesh, Candice, Chanel, Katie, Tiffany, and Garrett. They're like my solid team, and they are just beautiful people that have just like all these awesome skills that are helping me make this happen and helping me continue, the fight on. So that's great.
Absolutely, yeah. I myself have a team that works behind the team, and I always say when people ask me or are congratulating me for an event that we did, I'm like, look, I'm only as good as the team
Mhm.
that I have behind me,
Mhm.
and always give them credit because it is a team effort, not a one person effort. But thank you for being an ambassador and for being on Lens. We really appreciate it. We hope that you and I continue these conversations, and we can actually, as COVID tells us, what is our new reality in the coming months,
Yeah.
we're able to do something a little more physical, more kind of in person. Maybe we can solidify some type of relationship or collaboration,
Oh yeah, that'd be awesome.
continue having these conversations, because I think together we can achieve more. So
Mhm.
thank you for your time. Um, Happy to be a part of your vision. And for those who are tuning in, thank you so much. This session has been recorded and it will go on YouTube for those who reference later. And for those who are interested in checking out what you're doing, the best way to reach out to you would be to head over to your social media or your website.
Yeah, if you want to personally reach out to me, you can head over to my website, Mitzi Okou. It's MITZIOKOU.com, and I think all of my information's on there. And then my IG handle is Mitz_OK. And then if you want to join the platform, you can go to wearetheblackdesigners.com and join our Slack and follow us on Instagram as well.
And once we make this video live, we'll make sure that we put those social media links on in the in the area where those social media links go. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I'm sure we'll be in touch soon.
Thanks.
Take care, everyone.